Hi, I'm iHeartFunnyBoys. I'm a Godot game dev, and earlier in this week, I published a video on using the Godot IRC for Twitch or gift plugin, which helps you connect a Godot application to your Twitch chat. So today what I'm doing is extending on that tutorial to show you how I would rip apart the example and put it back together to make a game. The game I'm going to be making today is M.A.S.H, which stands for Mansion, Apartment, Shack, and House. It is a game that I played a lot with my friends as a kid, and essentially you pick random options for where you would end up living, what kind of career you're going to have, who you're going to marry, usually from a list of celebrities or something, and then how many kids you're going to have, and then you'd roll dice to find out what your future is going to look like. And the way I set it up here is pretty much the same. We do like random number generators to pull from arrays of different possible outcomes, and the chatter can call on this application to get a custom prediction of what their future is going to look like. And the response is sent into the chat with everyone else, and it's just a fun thing to read off and have a good laugh with the chatters, especially since one of the things we do in this one is the people you can potentially marry or have other types of relationships with are other chatters. So it's a lot of fun. So I'll go into more detail about how the game as a whole works. But first, I just wanted to show how I'm extending what came in the example project in case that's all you're here for. Okay. So I actually copied in the example code for the extension of the gift class from that earlier video. And what I ended up keeping from it, because I cut down quite a bit, was the chat message.connect on chat, the authenticate using an authorization file that's an auth.txt, which has my client ID and client secret as the first two lines. However, I changed it from a relative path to an absolute path in the res directory because the relative paths don't actually work when you're building it to Windows, and I wanted this to be a standalone Windows executable in the end. And of course, I moved it to my own project folder instead of the example one. Then after authenticate, connect to IRC, request caps. This is all the same as it was before. However, then I moved the add commands directly after and just did a one-time setup of those to create commands for just M.A.S.H, which is the game command, and then give suggestion, which is a secondary command that is for giving feedback. The chatters can give feedback and suggestions on how to change the game to the streamer. And then I added some aliases for the give suggestion command, especially M.A.S.H Plus is my favorite. That's going to be the one that I'm using the most. And then I have some communication with my user interface here to say, hey, we have connected successfully to Twitch once this await is finished. And then listening for setting a channel. So instead of having an initial channel that is hard-coded and set, we're not going to connect to a channel until we have connected to Twitch, and then we get a user interface command that tells us which one to connect to. So as you can see here, we have a text input box and a submit button. You can push enter from the text box. You can push submit. Either way, what it's going to do is it's going to trigger on channel set, which takes in the channel's name as a string. And then we disable that submit button. So we're not pushing this multiple times while it's still thinking, because it's an await-based process. We want to make sure that it's not getting multi-triggered. So yeah, we disable this button. We check if we're already connected to a channel, which is custom logic that I wrote, but then the leave channel is a function from the core gift class. So leave channel, and then we set a new channel so that we can check again if we have a set channel, and then we join the channel. So that's the same thing that we would have done in the example up here right after request caps with a default channel. So this way we're just looking at the one that gets sent in by the user, and then we wait for it to received. And then once we're in the channel, we re-enable the submit button in case you want to change channels again. And then the only other things we're really keeping in this script from the example, we're keeping the onChat function, but we changed the logic inside of it. But essentially what that's doing is it's called every time that someone chats in the channel that we're connected to. But instead of printing it, as we did in the example, to a window to see what activity is happening in the chat at a given time, what this does is it appends each unique user that is participating in the chat to an array. And we use that as part of the M.A.S.H game. So that was my purpose for collecting that. But the way we do that is we look at the data that is coming in with the message, coming in with the function call, and we pull out the user from that data. And that's what we're storing. So that's just going to be a string value, the name, the handle of the user that's participating. And then I believe the only other part of the gift that's really used here is the chat function calls. So well, I guess that's not totally true. But anyways, so we're using chat to send a message from the application back to the Twitch channel, back to the stream, and it'll look like a message from whoever launched the application and signed in. So in my case, it looks like I'm the one sending the message, and it'll either say, sorry, only one premonition per day, just like one string, or it'll just say M.A.S.H, which is just a different string that gets constructed. So in either case, we're just sending back strings. It's very uncomplicated. In this example as well, we are checking for the sender data.user. But in this case, since it's coming from a command, it's a subset of command info instead of just the raw data that comes in. And then in the gift suggestion, I guess another example here, the arg array is coming in. I should have explained why we get that. Basically, we have two different structures of how the functions are coming in from commands being called. So M.A.S.H is just command info. Give suggestion is command info and an arg array. And the reason we get an arg array is because when you're giving a suggestion, if you're using that command, you want to be able to write a string after of whatever your suggestion is for the streamer. So what we're doing is after we set up the initial message that's going to get stored in a text file for the streamer to review later. Once we set it up initially with like the name of the sender of the request and the time that they sent it, we are just going to run through the entire array of data, which is space separated. So we're going to reinsert the spaces so that it's more readable, of course. We're just going to append that full message on and then store it in a string. And the reason that this one has an arg array and this one doesn't is actually from when we added the commands. So here we said give suggestion is the function, and we said that the maximum amount of commands that this would have is -1, which means infinity in this case. And the minimum amount of args that it would have is 1. So there has to be at least one string coming after !M.A.S.H plus after the give suggestion command for this to actually go through. There's no blanks. You can't just send nothing. So yeah, that's how we're using it. That's the inputs and the outputs. And I can go into more detail now, but if that's all you were looking for is how do we connect inputs and outputs, this is it. But I think the game turned out pretty cool, so I'd love to show it off a little bit. So yeah, we call M.A.S.H manager, get M.A.S.H data, and what we're doing with this check here is just saying, if there's no one that's already registered as a participant, then we just send in their self, which is really just trying to say when you're constructing when you're constructing your strings, which is what the M.A.S.H manager does, and you're trying to find another chatter to include in the strings, just say their self, because you're going to just use their name again. Otherwise, if there are other participants, then we pick one at random and send it in as part of this function. And there's only allowed one call to M.A.S.H per chatter per instance, but there is a function to clear this out. All right, so then I will take you into the M.A.S.H manager logic here. We can take a look at what's under the hood. So get M.A.S.H data, that's the main function that we're calling. That is the function that we're calling, which is going to be returning a string that we're going to be sending out back into the channel. So get M.A.S.H data, we're sending in the requester, that's like the user's name, and the name of a random chatter, which it defaults to null if you didn't include that. In which case we'll sort it. So if we like look through this, then we're starting with an empty string, and we're just appending to MSG the results of different function calls, and then we're returning MSG. So that's the whole function logic. Get opener, get dwelling, get career, get relationship, get other, get conclusion. We're just building a string basically. So what we're doing here, this check, we're checking that this isn't null, because if this is null, we're going to skip the relationship part because we don't have a random chatter to send in. And then if the random chatter ends up randomly being selected at the requester, so if requester, let's say it's I Heart Funny Boys, and we just randomly also pick I Heart Funny Boys from the chat, then we're just going to change the language there to say, you know, I Heart Funny Boys marries their self, right? So that's the point there, just to clear up the language a little bit and make it more readable. And plus it's kind of fun. I've played this before as a streamer, and like being able to just see at a glance that it's their self, like that's how I read it out loud when I see it. So having it already in text is fun too, and makes it a little easier for me to avoid mistakes. I've definitely not realized it was someone marrying themselves before, and that's awkward. Anywho, so get opener, and really all of these are just setting up for a string and pulling data from a dictionary. So we have MFM, that's our file manager again, .myGameData, and then get keystring cat, which I believe is down here, yep, which just converts one of these, the dwelling, career, relationship, other, opener, or conclusion, converts that to the literal string version of itself, because I wanted this this dictionary to be readable to a person and not just to me. And then pick a random from it. So just like, I guess I should show what exactly this looks like before I go into too much more detail there. And then we're using a string format tool. So anytime that we see in curly brackets the string USER, user, then we replace the value with our requester's name. So then we can put that anywhere in the string instead of just in an explicit pre and post part of the string. It's much more readable, writable, shareable. And then we just add a space at the end, and then we return it. And then in these ones, it's pretty standard. We're just going to say they will live in blank. They will find work as blank. And then the get relationship one is they will blank, and then chatter. So this one, it's just like the user one, but it's the other chatter. It's the other person, and we replace that with the name of them. And for this one, formatting, because sometimes they just aren't used. Like there's some options where you marry I Heart Funny Boys, and there's some where you are single and loving it. So if that's the case, we don't want to insert my name at the end. We just leave it out. And then here, another, just like they will have blank. And then these ones are like, they're supposed to follow the format of like, they will have 6 kids or something. But then at least in my version, added a bunch of funny options that are a little weird. So just they will have blank. It's their other thing about them. You can kind of think of maybe what some funny things would be for that. And then a concluding sentence. So we have some concluding strings that possibly have the user's name in them. So again, we did the formatting, but most of them don't in my example. So yeah, it's just calling all those, piecing together a string, and that's what's getting sent out to the user. So then some other interesting things. I don't want to go too much into like how I set up the UI. I can make a separate video for that if people are really curious, but that's not really about the game logic. That's just like signaling UI. Let's go to the M.A.S.H file manager. So this is actually something that I did not construct from scratch. I referenced code I had written previously in order to do read to file and write files. So that was really important for getting this set up in a way that we can store long-term data, because one of the things I definitely wanted to do was be able to have the streamer write in new prompts or new pieces of the M.A.S.H and then be able to save that and not have to like rewrite them every time, because that's annoying. So we have default options that are built in, and I wrote an extensive list, but that's really just for me. If I was sharing this, I would probably make it possible to delete some of those as well. Although I think technically you can, but at the very least, I'd make it easier. And then we have a path in the user data for the saved data. So it would actually take a copy of this, and this is what gets read after it's created the first time. And then chat suggestions, txt. So that one's just storing raw txt of whatever people are sending into the chat, which you can just with the push of a button open with ease, and with a push of a button clear out if it's too much. And you can turn that off if you just don't want those messages coming in. I think on default it is off actually, so that makes it easier. Yeah, so then let's see. When we're opening this, we get the initial data. And yeah, like I said, that's either going to be your custom path if it exists, otherwise the default, which is going to be all my crazy suggestions. But again, if I were sharing this, I would probably neuter it a little bit and make it more palatable to a general audience. Reset game data. This is called from a button, and what it does is it just overwrites your game data with what is in the default. So if you wrote some things that you're like, let's do a fresh start, you could call this and then write all new ones if you wanted. Or if you just have like a typo and you don't know how to find the file. That's a little annoying though. I should probably make it easier to find the file. But anyway, resetting the chat suggestions literally just clears out the chat suggestions, so that you don't have to keep them if they suck. All right, and so then read save file and write save file. Those are the ones that I, for the most part, copied. I had to make a few tweaks, like, and by copied, I mean copied from a previous project I had made. So that one went really quickly to put together. But essentially just like being able to check if it's a dictionary or not meant I could reuse this function. Like in the original form, it was only written for dictionaries, but I wanted to be able to send in the string too for the suggestions files. So I had to make some adjustments there. Yeah, and then the only other thing of note, well, we have the new option added, which just appends this to the dictionary with a category name. So with whatever text you wrote out. We also have this one, which probably looks a little confusing, but basically what it's doing is it's listening for you to close the application. So if you pushed X in the top corner of the screen, or if you were debugging and you stopped it, in either case, it's going to call this. It's going to get into here. And what it's going to do is at that point, rewrite over your files with what your local data is. So we're not constantly writing to these files. We just do it when we're closing the application, or in the case of resetting the game data, or not resetting the suggestions, then we'll resave that immediately because we open that file directly from the application. Yeah, so that's this one. And then the only other thing I really wanted to show was the structure of the default options, just to give you an idea of what it's supposed to look like. And so if you wanted to use this yourself, I think it makes a fuller picture of how it's working. So this is the JSON file, so it's all in brackets, like a dictionary. And then we have a string which correlates to the categories in M.A.S.H. So dwelling is the same as here, dwelling. And then we just have a bunch of quotes, a bunch of strings in just an array. So it's an array of strings. And that's what all of them are, just an array of strings. So here, dwelling options. I heart funny boys will live in squalor. I heart funny boys will live in a treehouse. Career, I think it's set up something like they will find work as, and then it could be an IP lawyer or president of self-employed or an influencer, born wealthy. That'd be pretty cool. And then for relationship, they will blank. So they will marry Chatter. They will be best friends with Chatter. They will be single and loving it. Single and not loving it. And then the other, they will have is basically the setup of this sentence. They will have no kids. They will have 200 porcelain dolls. They will have 2 mortgages. They will have back pain. Like, you can do anything here. And then for the opener, that's like the first sentence in the M.A.S.H, and that one I put near the bottom just because I think those are ones you're going to be less likely to set than just like the 4 options of housing, career, relationship, kids, which is like the base of the game. So openers, let's peek into their future. Based on the current trends, this is what we can expect for the user. So we insert the user a few times in these for some of these options. I guess all of these ones. And then the same with the concluding sentence. Hey, it could be worse is an option. Or don't forget about us little people, user, right? So that's the idea there. And it's very easy then as a creator when you're using this to add in new strings, as long as you understand that structure, at the very least, you can just do hard-coded values and exclude the variables if you don't know how to use them. All right, here it is, and we'll just make it bigger, a little easier to see. Go ahead and submit. And then we should be connected now to the game. So if I do an exclamation mark M.A.S.H, there we go. We got our response back. I just got off the phone with I Heart Funny Boys' guidance counselor. They said if nothing changes, I Heart Funny Boys' life path is clear. They will live in a van down by the river. They will find work as a test subject. They will be roommates with their self. Doesn't sound so bad. They will have 2 mortgages. But hey, it could be worse. Pretty good. So then, okay, if I wanted to try to use it again, M.A.S.H, now we're going to get a message, sorry, 1 premonition per day. Okay, so if I clear the premonition history and then I tried it again, now we say, gazing into my crystal ball, blah, blah, blah. You get it. We got it again. We got the premonition again. I'm going to clear the suggestion log because I don't know what's in it for my tests. We can click this button to open the suggestion logs, and it's just blank because I just cleared it. And then, why don't we say exclamation mark M.A.S.H plus, let's make a suggestion here. I would love to be a zoo tycoon. I don't know. Zoo tycoon. I want to be a zoo tycoon. All right, so if we open the log now, we don't have anything still. And you're probably wondering, why is that? Let's enable suggestions, and then and then we'll get them. All right, so let's see, M.A.S.H. Make me taller, please. All right. There we go. We see a message from me at 4:30 p.m. I Heart Funny Boys says, make me taller, please. And I'm like, that's toxic. Gonna clear that. If I click back in, it's cleared now. All right. And then the other thing we can do, we have a drop down here, and we can select any of these options. So our dwelling, our career, our relationship, our other, our opener, or our conclusion. And we can submit those as potential options. So these aren't like the guaranteed list then, but it gets added to the list for a random pick. So let's just say our other is, and she is really, really, really cool. Add it. And then I'm going to add it like 100 more times because I want to increase the chances that we actually get this one. So I'm just spamming this now. All right. And I'm going to clear the premonition history so that I can request it again. They will have, she is really, really, really cool. There you have it. I'm cool. All right. And so now there's like 60 of the really, really cool that doesn't even make sense in the sentence. So we can reset custom options. Let's try it again. All right. Not really cool. Just emotional damage. Let's try it again. Yep. Now I have a hyper intelligent monkey. Not really cool. It's official. I am showing it this way. I could have opened the file where we're actually looking at these and proven that it gets removed, but it's not already open on my computer, and I don't feel like... Well, I guess it actually is open on my computer. It's right here. Oh, no, it's not. Okay. Really, really, really cool. So yeah, now I have a M.A.S.H game. I'm excited about playing with my chatters in the next stream. Obviously, the UI for this is something that I don't really have to show to the stream ever. If I wanted to just only ever open it to add suggestions, or like in private, or if I just wanted to like log in and then leave it and not look at it, that's fine. The idea of opening the chat suggestion log was that if I click on it and there was like, you know, 8 suggestions here of like different careers, then I could just go here to career and then like write what they're suggesting to me, like this, that, and the other, essentially. I believe pushing enter actually submits this too. So a few things that I would change if I were to make more tweaks to this now, which I probably will, because why wouldn't I? I think it would make sense. What I currently have for the logic here for, if we go back to the gift, what we have right now for the on chat, we have an array of all the participants, and they all have an equal chance of being the participant that gets picked for these. I might want to change this to actually have it weighted by more recent chatters and based on how much they're chatting. So a way I would do this potentially is I would have a max number of chatters that are considered, or have just like a timer going whenever... probably a max number makes more sense. Maybe like, yeah, so first in, first out kind of thing. So if I'm chatting like 5 times in a row and then one other person chats once, it's 5 times as likely I'm going to get pulled into the M.A.S.H. I think it's something I would play with at least as an option. Also, for the suggestions, I would also want to limit how frequently one person can make a suggestion. Because if someone's just trying to spam it, I don't currently have a way to defend against that because this isn't like a built-in command to Streamlabs that can block it. So adding some logic for that I think would be good, just to be like, if this person's chatted or is in the list of frequent or like recent chatters or something, like give them a cooldown essentially. That might be hard though. That might be adding timers. So maybe I just do a timestamp of last time they chatted and then calculate a delta on it and then say, okay, well, you're trying to chat on this. You're trying to give a suggestion, but you gave one like 3 minutes ago. So wait. It won't like totally solve your problem, but it would definitely slow it down if someone's trying to spam you. And if you see that happening, you can just turn off suggestions and then they're just yelling into the void. I also make a file size limit for the suggestions. So if you're not paying attention to it and it's getting really big, maybe we just flush it when it gets to a certain age. Maybe. I'm not sure. Something I'm thinking about though. What else is there to say? I had a lot of fun setting up the visuals for this, the rainbow color and stuff for the title. I played a lot with the rich text label, and that was a lot of fun. So if that's something that you're curious to see me explain what I did, curious to see me talk in more depth about UI design or UI development for Godot, I'm happy to talk about that. So yeah, let me know. All right, I think that's everything. So if you like the video, definitely consider subscribing. I'll hopefully be putting out more in the near future. And if you like the general vibe, definitely consider coming over to Twitch too. I stream twice per week, just doing Godot game dev and generally having a good time. So yeah, thanks.